Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Hello, American history students. So today we're going to talk specifically about Pearl Harbor. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, if we do have you teach a battle from World War II, sometimes I do that. I'm going to show you an example of how I would like you to do your presentation. Secondly, this is just when one of my real interests, my birthday is December 7th. It is not in 1941, or I would be a little bit older, but my dad always said 2 bombs dropped on Pearl Harbor, and that was the ones in Hawaii and also me. So I've always taken a real interest in Pearl Harbor, so I'm going to teach you a little bit about it. All right, here we go. So the speech that you just heard was announced by FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to Congress, basically getting permission to go to war with Japan. And it was an like a overall, like, everybody was like, yes, absolutely. Now I wanted to show you something because they don't always show this part of the speech, and I think this is really interesting. So you always know the famous part at the beginning. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. First of all, notice this is his original speech. He changed some words. So the original version did not have infamy in it, and yet that's obviously a really big part of that speech. The other thing that you'll notice if you look on the second page, he very specifically lists every single place that the Japanese attacked. They controlled over half of the Pacific at the time. My question to you is, why do you think he did this? Listen, yesterday, the Japanese government also launched an attack against Malaya. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Hong Kong. Last night, Japanese forces attacked Guam. Last night, Japanese forces attacked the Philippine Islands. Last night, the Japanese attacked Wake Island. This morning, the Japanese attacked Midway Island. So why do you think he took time to list each and every one of those? Couple of things. First of all, I think he wanted to show that this was not just one place. They attacked also in the Aleutian Islands attached to Alaska. So this was a very coordinated attack for every single place to be attacked all at the same time. I mean, this took a lot of premeditative thinking. And let's talk about that word premeditative, meaning they knew it was coming a long time ago. And yet they were sitting at the table talking and shaking hands. And that was one of the things he mentioned in the speech, that it was like they were lying, basically. So I also think he does this for emphasis. It's really good speaking to reiterate again and again, hammer it home that the Japanese attacked us in this surprise way. Okay, so let's talk about some of the basics. This is one of very few original photos from Pearl Harbor. Remember that this was not a time period when they had cell phones like you do today. It was a Sunday morning. A lot of the guys were sleeping in. There was a very small skeleton crew on a Sunday. It's December. Christmas is coming. A lot of guys were out the night before. So there weren't like a lot of people sitting out there with their cameras. So a lot of the pictures you'll see are after the damage has been done and it's exploding, to be honest with you. This is a very famous photo, of course. Here you'll see a lot of the oil burning, people going and trying to rescue people in the water, on ship, a lot of the damage that was done. So how many of you have been to Pearl Harbor Memorial in Hawaii? I've had a few of you I know that have said yes. I definitely recommend that you do this at some point in your life. It is one of the most incredible memorials I've ever been to. So when Pearl Harbor was attacked, and I'll show you on a map in just a little bit, there was one ship specifically, the Arizona, that sunk, and they decided to make it basically a cemetery or a grave site. And the people that died in that ship are still in that ship. And so the memorial is actually over the top of this ship. And you take a boat out to there. As you go out there, they remind you that this is a cemetery and should be treated as such. So it's a very solemn place. And you go in there, there's an eternal flame burning and a list of all of the people that died at Pearl Harbor. And it also gives veterans from Pearl Harbor the option of putting their cremated remains down there in the Arizona. And so some people have chosen to do that, and their names are listed there as well. It's a pretty amazing place to be. Here's a picture of it from up above, so you can see the Arizona. Now, when I was there last, there was still oil leaking from the USS Arizona, which is just bizarre to imagine, isn't it? So let's look at the basics. Who was involved? We have Japan and the United States. The leader of the Japanese was General Nagumo. The leader of the U.S. forces, General Kimmel, was in charge of the Navy. General Short was in charge of the Army Air Corps. Now, sadly, these gentlemen were actually dismissed because of failure to see this coming and that they were not prepared. Now, notice that those charges were dismissed in 1999 and they were given their honors back. But at the time, that's what happened. The branches involved in Japan, this would be the Navy. In the US, we had a lot of different groups in Hawaii. We had the Navy, the Army Air Corps, and the Marine Air Corps. It took place, as I said, Sunday, December 7th, 1941 at 7:53 a.m. And that was on purpose. They knew that on a Sunday morning we would be a little less prepared, let's say that, because it was a Sunday. And remember, we weren't expecting an attack from Japan. This surprised us. This is a very unique photo. There are very few photos that exist of the Japanese pilots before they took off for Pearl Harbor. And this is them right there on the aircraft carrier. Where did it happen? Pearl Harbor in Oahu in Hawaii. Very beautiful place to visit. And it's on the main island of Hawaii for those that haven't been there. Why did it happen? Couple of reasons. First of all, remember that Japan had invaded China, and China was our ally, and they refused to move out of China, so the U.S. completely blockaded Japan and cut off their oil supply. And Japan knew that they were going to run out of oil within a few months, so either they had to do what the United States said, or they had to get the jump on their enemy and attack first, which is what they did. We also closed the Panama Canal for use by Japan. And remember that canal is a shortcut for all of our ships, for anybody's ships. And so that was a big issue for them. The purpose of the attack was to disable our naval fleet. So why did they choose Hawaii? Because this is where most of our naval fleet was located. And they had been told by spies in Hawaii that our 3 aircraft carriers, those are our big floating cities, were going to be there. Luckily, they were wrong, and they were out at sea at the time, or it would have been even worse, the damage. But they attacked there, and their goal was to disable our naval fleet for about a year. That was the goal. This is another very rare photo of one of the Japanese Zero planes attacking or leaving for the Pearl Harbor attack. Let's look at our statistics. The U.S. had 2,403 military killed in action, 1,178 wounded in action, 68 civilians were killed in action, and sadly, most of those were by friendly fire. Imagine that you're shooting at these planes as they're going overhead, and some of that stuff is coming down on our own people. The other thing to remember is that the Japanese were also attacking civilians on the land as well over by our military buildings. So, we hit some of the civilians as we were shooting at them in that case. We had 35 civilians wounded in action. Japan had 55 airmen killed in action because eventually we did get some planes up in the air. We had guys shooting at them from our ships, and they did knock a few of those planes down. We had 9 submariners killed in action. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. And 1 submariner was actually captured. What or how did it happen? Let's be real. It took the US completely by surprise, and we were slaughtered. We were not ready for this, and we took a huge hit on December 7th. The attack lasted a total of 90 minutes. I want you to imagine, you guys, that's about as long as one of your final semester tests. Think about that. All of those people dead or wounded in that amount of time. And it started with the sinking of a 2-person Japanese midget sub. So here's what was going on. They sent these little midget subs to basically make sure that no ships escaped during the attack. And one of our ships actually ran into them ahead of time and sunk this sub. And unfortunately, that message did not get to our generals fast enough for us to be prepared for this. And that's something, if you are really into this, I would highly recommend that you watch this movie, Pearl Harbor. Yes, it has a little bit of romance and some of that fictional stuff in it, but they really did try to do the best they could to reenact Pearl Harbor as it was, as best as possible. In fact, the first people to actually watch this movie were actually Pearl Harbor veterans at Pearl Harbor. Can you imagine having a harder judge than that? So they really did try to honor those men. What or how did it happen? The attack on Pearl Harbor was supposed to have 3 waves to it. The first wave, they were hitting the harbor and hitting our ships, and boy, did they ever. Okay. The second wave, they hit the airfields. And when you see our movie clip from Pearl Harbor, the movie, you'll see that happening. There are 2 airfields that I'll show you on a map in just a little bit. They did hit both of those airfields and just destroyed our planes. The third wave was supposed to hit our oil supplies there and other targets, and it was canceled. The question is, why was that third wave canceled? Because it was no longer a covert attack. Remember, covert means it's a surprise. By this time, we now had people shooting back, and they saw that their losses had doubled in the second wave. Plus, you have to remember that these planes that are attacking came off of an aircraft carrier. So that's dangerous for 2 reasons. Number one, those planes don't have a real big gas tank. So they wouldn't have a large enough amount of gas to get back to the aircraft carrier. And they didn't want to lose those planes. Secondly, they didn't have night capability in those planes like we do today. So they didn't want to carry it on too late into the day. And the third reason, they didn't want their aircraft carrier to get discovered. If you've ever played Battleship, you know it's like, oh, I sank your battleship. Like when you hit that aircraft carrier, that's a big deal because it's a floating city. And if our pilots followed those planes back to the aircraft carrier, they could sink it. And they didn't dare to let that happen. So they canceled the third wave. Here's a map of Pearl Harbor, and I'm going to point out a few things to you. They did a lot of damage, especially right here in this row. This is where the USS Arizona sunk, right here. The Oklahoma was sunk. A lot of these took big hits here. They also did a lot of damage over here. Right over here, this is like the hospital area. And in the movie, you'll see that they're attacking on land. That's this area right over here where a lot of our government buildings are and our hospital are. Lots of damage. Now, the sub that we sunk earlier in the morning was right up here in this area. The second wave that hit our airplanes, the first one was right here in the middle of Pearl Harbor. That's Ford Island Naval Air Station. And the second one, if you see in the movie clip that our pilots are racing off to Hickam Field, that's this one right here. And it's this way about a mile that direction. Okay. Yeah. Couple of stories just to make it somewhat interesting. First of all, the USS Arizona that you see today was about half of the fatalities that day. The USS Nevada was actually going to head to sea, but it was ordered beached in case it would actually get shot down or sink and crash in the entryway to Pearl Harbor. So they basically took the hit right where they were at. One smaller ship was actually started by 4 ensigns, which is very hard to do, by the way, and they set out to sea. And it wasn't until 4 days later that they actually caught up to this group of 4 guys and said, "It's okay, you can come back to Pearl Harbor again," because they didn't want to dare get sunk. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to show you on this map. I remember what it was. One of the things that I remembered thinking when I was younger was, okay, if they're shooting at your ship, why wouldn't you get off the ship? Go into the water, go on land, get away from it. But there's a couple of things that come into play that I didn't understand until I was there and saw some things. First of all, remember that they are attacking on land. So it wasn't like you were safe anywhere. They were attacking everywhere. They shot at our guys in the water, which was like a no. You didn't usually do that. So you weren't even safe in the water. Plus, the oil was burning in the water. So if you jumped into the water, you could burn to death as well. Um, and remember that these guys were trying to do their duty and try to save their ship. That's their job. So they were manning guns. They were trying to section off the parts of the ship that couldn't be repaired. And before long, it was too late. In fact, one of the saddest stories is after these ships are sunk, they're trying to get to these guys and they're knocking, on the bottom of the ship, trying to get out. And they don't have enough welding torches to open up those ships and get to them, and they drown to death. So very sad story. Let's take a look at the damage that was done. For the US, 9 ships were destroyed, 7 were damaged, 188 planes were destroyed, and 155 planes were damaged. That is massive casualty. In 90 minutes, that is just horrendous. By the way, one of the reasons that so many of our planes were destroyed, and if you're reading your article on Pearl Harbor, the people at Hawaii were not worried about an air attack. They never in a million years thought that that would happen. They were more concerned about sabotage on land because we knew that they had spies. We assumed. I mean, we had spies everywhere too. So what they did, if you can imagine that, let's imagine that this is your airfield. They took all the planes and they moved them away from the fences on the outside and put them in the middle, wingtip to wingtip, nice and tight, so that they wouldn't get attacked if someone threw a grenade, for example. Well, think about it. If they're wingtip to wingtip and this Japanese Zero, hits them or a bomber hits them, think about what that's going to do. This one catches on fire, then this one, then this one, then this one. So because they were parked so close together, they actually had more casualties. Now, the Japanese had 29 planes destroyed and 5 subs sunk, as we mentioned. There's still one that's missing, and we don't know where it is. Why is it important to World War II or to history? Number one, this starts the war for us in the United States, and we get involved. Another reason, some people would claim that it actually caused the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Depends on why you think we dropped the bomb on those 2 cities. Some people would say it was a little bit of a revenge factor for the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I think that's very, very real. People were angry. They were furious with what happened. And it was really the first time we had seen people attack us on our homeland. And so we were very angry. There's no doubt about that. Okay. All right. So we're going to stop right now and we're going to watch a little bit of Pearl Harbor. I recommend that you do that at home if you have not done so. See you later.